Hello to everyone and thank you for joining us. I'm Robert Timms, Director of Earth Capital. We're delighted to be hosting this webinar today in conjunction with Edison. For those who don't know us, Earth Capital are specialist corporate finance advisors. We work with sustainability-focused businesses to help support their growth ambitions. Today, we'll be hearing from Hybrid Air Vehicles, who hopefully you can see on screen. They're working at the forefront of sustainable aviation to develop a new type of aircraft called the Airlander, which you'll be hearing all about. I'm joined today by Hoofer Gwynn, the CFO of Hybrid Air Vehicles, and his colleague Chris Jones, Executive Finance Director. Hopefully you can see them both in their boardroom with a picture of the Airlander behind them, just to get a sense of scale, although I should stress that's not to scale, otherwise it would be a very underwhelming project. They're going to be, Hoofer will be presenting where the Airlander program is today and what the plans are for the short-term and long-term future, both in terms of the technology and also the overall business model and funding and where they're going, really. I should say we want this to be quite interactive if possible, so do please feel free to ask any questions that you'd like to ask. Just a note around confidentiality. You've probably noticed that for attendees, your cameras and your audio are automatically switched off. So to ask questions, do please use the Q&A panel or the Q&A button at the top of your screen normally. If you're used to using Teams, you're probably used to using the chat function. Just to say, please don't use the chat function today, use the Q&A panel. That allows us to sort of see what questions are being asked and also allows you to post questions anonymously, so you're not obliged to share your name. So yeah, welcome to submit any questions you want at any point. Once Hoofer's then gone through his presentation, I'll read out a selection of questions for Hoofer to answer, and Chris, who you can see next to him, may also support with some of the answers as well. If anything gets too overly technical or complicated, of course, we can always follow up with answers from by email afterwards, but I'm sure Chris and Hoofer are very well versed in the most technically complicated questions, both in terms of the technology of the Airlander and the finances. So without much further ado, I will now hand over to Hoofer, who's going to present. And as I say, do please feel free to ask questions through the Q&A box as we go along, and then we'll start the Q&A session sort of more formally after Hoofer's presentation. So Hoofer, over to you. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Robert, for the introduction. Thank you also to Earth Capital for supporting us both today and actually over the run-up to this event and for a little while. Also very grateful to Edison for pulling this all together, and Robert, very kind of you to agree to host the panel today. So that is very much appreciated. The only admin point which I might just add is when you ask a question through the Q&A chat room, there is an ability to do that on an anonymized basis or with your name attached. So, you know, please, I do encourage you to put your questions forward to us, and Chris and I will do the best job we can of answering them, albeit Robert slightly set me up for a technical fall guy there, I feel a little bit. So the plan is to go through a little bit of a presentation, talk about the business, talk about the technology, some of the markets and where we're going, and then we'll move into a Q&A. One of the great joys of my job is introducing people to Airlander. We are doing something genuinely new and unique here. And so it's a great pleasure for me to do events like today where I bring people up to speed on what we are doing. Let me just deal with the technical bit of sharing a presentation so we can have something to look at, and then we will get moving. So I'm hopeful that you've all got the front screen of the presentation come up, and I hope you can all hear me. If there are any issues with audio or anything, please just do note into the chat and we'll see what we can do about that. So as I say, we are doing something genuinely unique here at Hybrid Air Vehicles. We are pioneering zero emissions aircraft for a better connected tomorrow. And as I go through this presentation, that better connected, I think what you will see, what's going to come out is, yes, that is about delivering a step change in emissions in aviation, which is a huge challenge for the sector. So we've got the opportunity to do something really special here and to do it early. But when we talk about better connections, actually some of the unique characteristics of the aircraft, the fact this aircraft can be infrastructure light, that it can take off and land from any flat surface, be that the grass field you see there, water, ice or sand, it allows us to create new global connections without some of the big and crippling costs of infrastructure. So we think about better connections in those two senses, and I think that will come out as I go through the presentation. So Airlander is a dual-use decarbonised air transportation platform. It's going to be used for regional passenger transportation and ecotourism, communications and surveillance, and also logistics. So these are some really big markets that we address. It's a huge overall market opportunity, which I think you guys are going to be really excited to find out about. We've actually been through the point of proving this technology. So we've gone to full-scale prototype, and where you find the business today is we're at the point of getting ready to scale up and deliver these aircraft to our customers. So we're in that scale up and delivery challenge. Obviously, it's great to be able to sit here today and to talk to investors and say, given that's the point in the life cycle we're at, it's great that we can sit here saying we've got 7 billion pipeline of qualified pipeline with customers, and within that amount, we've actually got 2 billion of reservations sitting there with customers. So a very strong market position from where we're driving forward from. And if I can deal with the technology of getting the the slide to move forward, then we'll progress on. So in terms of the why are we doing this? Why have we designed this aircraft? Why are we developing this and driving it towards market? We see within HAV that there is a vast blue ocean between today's fast, expensive, energy-intensive and polluting aircraft and today's relatively cheap, relatively cost-effective, but slow ground transportation. We see a big gap between those two offerings. And when you look at the overall transportation landscape, it's a 750 billion per annum market opportunity. So if there is a gap between those two options, there's a huge market potential for a technology that can find a space in there. And that's absolutely where we've positioned Airlander. Just to bring that to life for you a little bit, if we consider one of the markets which we're going to go into, logistics, you could stick a pallet of goods in a truck, drive it to the airport, put it on a plane, fly it somewhere around the world onto a truck at the other end and deliver it. And your journey time there is going to be about 1 to 2 days in reality. You can take that same box of goods, and if you go and put it onto a ship, your journey time blows out to about 6 weeks, assuming that you can actually get capacity on a ship today, which is a different challenge. So we see a huge gap in that market, and we've got an opportunity with Airlander to be able to offer an intermediate offering. We're not as fast as the air transportation, but we've got an ability to massively reduce emissions. So we'll be 90% less emissions than the air freight. Our delivery time's likely to be sort of 3 to 4 days, not 1 to 2 days, but a little bit slower. And over time, our costs transitions down more towards ground-based transportation than it does towards air freight. And so in that gap in the market, there's a huge opportunity. If you couple with that at the moment, probably about 1% of the volume of goods go by air freight, so 99% go by ground transportation, but it's about 30% by value. So there's that great opportunity there in logistics. And we see comparable opportunities when you look at things like mobility. So again, if you're doing short hop journeys, which many of our journeys around Europe and around the world are short hop journeys, half of all journeys in Europe are less than 370 kilometers. You can do it on a fixed wing aircraft. You're flying very, very fast over quite short sectors, but it's quite, ends up being quite a long journey, 4-hour journey if you're, going from sort of mainland UK over to Ireland because of the time of getting to the airports for a relatively short flight. You can hop on the ferry and then it turns into a much, much longer journey. With Airlander, we've got that ability again to take the emissions out of aviation. It's cost competitive, but to offer a faster journey. And that's really what that's the why. That's what we're all about. And that's where we see Airlander sitting in the overall transportation landscape. I touched on the first slide about our market position, and this is just digging into that a little bit more. As we sit here today, we've got, as I say, 7 billion qualified pipeline, 2 billion of reservations. Just those are some very big numbers. So to think about those a different way, if we delivered that 7 billion of qualified pipeline from our intended production capacity, that would take care of about our first 5 years of production capacity at rate 24. So it's a really strong market lead. In terms of who's leading in those reservations, Air Nostrum there Air Nostrum is a very well-known operator, A to B passenger operator in Europe. Not necessarily a household name because they operate under Iberia's brand. So they're a franchisee of Iberia. We've worked with them since before June 2022 when they put down the original deposit. What they are really interested in is how do they keep flying short sectors in Europe while decarbonising aviation? So we did some pre-reservation work with Air Nostrum where they cost competed Airlander against their current fleet that they're using around the Balearics, CRJ 1000s, looked at dispatch reliability, cost per seat kilometre, all those kind of things, and showed that Airlander, not only was it coming out slightly cheaper, 10% cheaper, so not, cheaper than their existing fleet to operate, nicer user experience, but a 90% reduction in emissions compared to what their aircraft are currently doing. So that's the key reason, or one of the key reasons why they stepped in to put an early reservation down. They then actually increased the size of their reservation in August 2022. The next customer on this slide is Hightrans. That's part of the Scottish governmental infrastructure. Hightrans have the remit for delivering about or covering about half of the Scottish transportation network. They're very interested in how do they connect the mainland to the Scottish Island network and how do they do that in a low emissions way. So we did a lot of study work with them where they wanted to look at the dispatch reliability, the cost of operations, Airlander's tolerance to weather before they laid down this reservation. We progressed really well through that study work before then that we put down a reservation for 6 aircraft for their use case. One of the things that was really interesting for me that came out of their study was that they've got small airfields on places like the Orkneys and the Shetlands. Currently, they can take 19-seat aircraft with minimal cost of modification because Airlander's quite a light aircraft. We've got short takeoff and landing. They can get a 100-seat Airlander onto those airfields with minimum cost of modification. And that's so transformative, actually, that they're interested in looking at taking combi aircraft where they're using part logistics, part passenger aircraft. Really interesting, great use case for us. Third customer on the slide, Grand Espace. Different use case. They are interested in, rather than having 100 passengers on board for short hot mobility, change the cabin space, put 8 double ensuite bedrooms on board, and suddenly you've got the equivalent of a cruise ship in the sky, which can get to places like the North Pole and can land on the ice. Because we're a light aircraft, we don't need a conventional runway, just a big open field, big open space, including water. So we're offering customers new opportunities, decarbonised opportunities, opportunities to create new networks and get to places that you just can't with current aircraft, which is a really exciting proposition. The overall qualified pipeline on the other side of the graph, 97 aircraft, 15 customers, about 7.22 billion. The aircraft we're coming to market with is the Airlander 10. It will lift the same as a biggest military transport helicopter, a Chinook, about 10 tons, or take 100 passengers. This technology scales really, really well as we go into the future. And so we founded something called the Airlander Futures Network, which is bringing forward customers for those larger aircraft where that's going to move into core competence freight and to start to understand their requirements in things like logistics, cargo, humanitarian aid, and disaster relief. Pleasingly, this year we added Kuhn and Nagel to our group of participants in that, which is a great validator of what we're looking to do. So, just here, having a little bit of a look about how the market breaks down in terms of the individual segments. You can see we've got a really nice diversified split between regional passenger transport and ecotourism, which we do split out separately, but really I think about different mobility use cases. Then communications and surveillance, and then logistics. You can see logistics is the largest part of the market. As we scale this technology and we get into a bigger aircraft, logistics will dominate, and that percentage of the pie will actually get bigger. But we've got a really nice diversified use case aircraft here. Very interestingly, we only make one aircraft to cover each of those 3 markets. It's the same core aircraft made over and over again, and we just modify the payload space which sits under the hull. So we've got a really efficient business model. On the other side of the graph, what you can see here is the split between the civil and the military markets for us at the moment. It's shown to be about 50-50. And again, that's a great de-risker for us. Military markets tend to be a little bit counter-cyclical, and so that puts resilience into our business model. We've also got on here, in terms of how we're going to develop our business, one of the things that's key to us is about partnership. We're going to form long-term partnerships to help deliver these aircraft. They're 20-year life aircraft or more. And so partnering with delivery organizations like BAE Systems, who will help us develop the military markets, is key to what we do. And those partnerships also speak to the capability of our organization and the people we are working with. So we've got the opportunity with Airlander to do something really meaningful in terms of helping abate emissions in a sector where it is going to be really challenging to get emissions out. Airlander targets about 20% of the 2050 aviation sector emissions. That is a big number. And I think critically, we've got the opportunity to start delivering on that this decade. We're looking to have Airlander aircraft in service this decade. There are many other technologies which are coming along. They've got real scaling issues, investment issues, technology issues. You know, when you look at things like the adoption of hydrogen fuel cell technology, it's going to take time to get to scale. They're going to come, but we think we're going to be one of the earliest drivers, one of the earliest people to start driving emissions out of aviation. And I think that's really key. So, and without adopting any green technologies, we can already deliver up to a 90% reduction in emissions. The technology for us to do that is all available today. We don't need any new technologies, and there's no green premium for adopting Airlander, which is really critical for our customers. So a little bit about the technology. Now, very commonly when I start talking to people, they look at this aircraft first, and what they see in their heads or what they relate to is an airship. And we do use some airship technology, but we are not an airship. We combine the use of a lifting gas, which we put into that big white space, the hull space there, but we only use that to offset some of the aircraft's weight. We fly because of the additional lifting technology that we use, which is an aerofoil, because that large white structure you can see, it's a wing. The use of helium negates some of the dead weight of the aircraft, and that allows us to be super efficient. But it's the combination of those two technologies which is critical, because we operate as a heavier than air aircraft. And that means if I take payload to a remote location, I'm delivering goods or logistics, and I take those goods off of the aircraft, we don't have the issue which airships of old have had, which is that you have excess buoyancy and you're floating away from the ground. So the combination of those two technologies together is critical for us. And we can only build this aircraft because of modern materials and technologies. This simply couldn't have been done, 20, 30, 50 years ago. So Airlander is a large, long endurance, ultra low emissions aircraft. The hybrid design means that it's intrinsically safe. It's optimized for efficiency by combining that buoyancy and the aerodynamic lift together, but it operates as a heavier than air aircraft, which means that we need minimal ground infrastructure and that we can rapidly turn the aircraft around. And everyone who owns and operates aircraft knows that they make their money in the air, not when they're sitting on the ground. That unique combination of technologies also means that we can deliver point-to-point operations. We don't need the conventional airfield, as I've said. So we can create new networks operating from ice, sand, grass, marsh, water. We can create connections into places like northern Canada or in Africa, where the good ground-based infrastructure, the hard-top roads, the deep water ports of the rail aren't there, and do that super cost effectively. So just in terms of some performance metrics, we've got an aircraft that can fly for 5 days, and I'm sure you can think of the power of doing that with some of the biggest surveillance systems in the world. It can fly for about 7,500 kilometers, so it's got a long range. We can take 10 tons of payload like a Chinook or 100 passengers, and scale for the aviation industry is really important. You know, when we talk to companies like Air Nostrum, their business model doesn't work delivering small packets of people. You need to have scale, and the fact we're going to get there first at scale is really important. Aircraft does about 130 kilometers an hour, and it is a big aircraft. It's 98 meters long. It's 30 meters high, nearly 30 meters high, and nearly 50 meters wide. This is, as I said at the beginning, this is a proven technology. We're the only people in the world who have taken a hybrid design like this to full scale and flown it repeatedly. We did that in US and UK airspace. In order to get here, we've invested about £140 million. That's allowed us to de-risk and prove the technology. And in doing that, we've also worked with the regulator, so the process is fully agreed for how we are going to type certify this aircraft. We've not type certified it, but the process for doing that. We've also, through operating the aircraft, we've got detailed cost modelling, and we've tested that with real world data, and that's critical so we can go to our customers and make them confident about what the cost of operations of the aircraft are going to be. Few USPs of the aircraft. Ecotourism. I've touched on this a little bit already. We've got the ability to provide unique experiences with unparalleled comfort and with minimal environmental impact. The owner of Grand Espace, a guy called Christian Kempf, he is one of the world's preeminent experts on polar bears and an Arctic explorer. So he's incredibly sensitive about how he provides trips into the poles. And so our ESG credentials and his are a very strong fit. We've equally got opportunities to do air safaris, in South America, in places in Africa, really getting to some of the world's most beautiful places and doing it in a very, very different way. In regional passenger transportation, we are showing that this aircraft doesn't have a green premium for adoption. That's a pretty incredible thing for a new technology. So that's great. When you couple that with an immediate 90% reduction in emissions, that's incredibly powerful. We are seeing European governments start to legislate against using fixed-wing aircraft, highly polluting aircraft on short sectors. We saw this when Air France bailed out KLM during the pandemic, told them they could no longer fly between cities where you could do a journey in 2 hours on the TGV. Sweden wants its domestic aviation to be net zero by 2030. That is a huge challenge, and that plays into the sweet spot of Airlander. When you get to things like communication and surveillance, military customers, we think that our cost per flying hour for a fixed capability is a 10x lower. So that is either 10x more capability or 10x lower cost. And if you want to do surveillance, whether you're governmental or commercial, that is it. That is transformative. So very strong market there. And in logistics, it is low cost, ultra low emissions air freight, accommodates outsized payloads and has minimal infrastructure. So we can supplement congested markets. We can do that in an emissions efficient way. We can also create new networks, and that's a really powerful opportunity for us. Certification. This is a new aircraft type, but we're quite a long way already through our aircraft journey, and we are going to be certifying this aircraft against an established set of rules. So we've engaged with the UK CAA, with the EASA, and with the FAA. We worked with the EASA to define the certification basis for this aircraft before Brexit. So we were involved in that process. Those are now being adopted by the CAA. We have agreed to take the CAA as our lead regulator, but FAA and EASA will be looking over their shoulder. So as near to concurrently as you can, we'll get the three major regulators around the world. We're design organisation, production organisation approved, one of only 3 companies in Europe for multi-engine large-scale aircraft to have that. Agreed certification basis, and we are partway through the detailed means of compliance acceptance. So quite a long way through that journey. And we are going to be a twin-engine commercially piloted aircraft operating in normal commercial airspace. We're not undertaking some of the challenges that the eVTOL companies are with electric engines straight off the bat in cityscape type locations. So it's a much more proven path. In terms of the team who is helping deliver our plans, I think they are best described as having worked in some of the largest preeminent organizations in the world. So they understand the control environment and the processes of those big organizations who have then moved into the more entrepreneurial space. So our CEO, Tom Grundy, worked at BAE Systems, worked at Airbus. Our COO was Raytheon and GKN. I worked at PwC, specializing in entrepreneurial growth businesses. It's those kind of skill sets that are within the business. We've got an incredibly strong advisory board as well who supplements that. Picking out a couple of examples, Tony Anderson, he was the first marketing director of EasyJet, so used to how you bring new offerings to market. John Schumacher, who's heading up our newly incorporated US business. He was chief of staff at NASA, very strong DoD ties. Gary Waterfall, who was former chief of staff at PGHQ, helped run the Libya air campaign. These are the kind of people who are working alongside and helping us deliver it. Some of our partner names down the bottom, people like AECOM helping us on our hydrogen delivery strategy, also on our facilities plans, and ultimately are likely to be a long-term user of the larger aircraft, the Advanced Manufacturing Research Centre. So some of these preeminent organisations who are helping coming alongside us in our delivery plans. In terms of from a financial sense, what we are setting out to deliver, this is a large scale business. If we deliver at the low end of what our plans are, that's 24 Airlander, 10 aircraft per annum. It's about a 1.2 billion turnover business. If we go out and double that to 48, you're obviously up at about 2.4 billion, and that's before you start to bring on the Airlander 50, which you can see coming in there in 2033, a whole new product offering. It hasn't matured there. That will add another sort of $1.5 billion. So the market opportunity here is absolutely huge, a really, really exciting business from that scale of things. And we only need to make small inroads into those existing markets to be able to deliver on this. So look, that is a very fast spin through the business, the technology, and where we are at. We are at the exciting point where we are driving into our scale up and delivery plans. We do have a current round open which is really focused on high net worth individuals, nimble family offices and VCs. We've priced that at 86p is the current round, where we've raised about 4 million under that. Sitting behind that, we are going to move into a much larger institutional round. So if there are people on the call who are, bigger ticket writers, sort of 5 million, 10 million, that would be the round that would be more applicable for you. We've got a really strong return profile. We think investors who are coming into the current round, the 86p round, we think will deliver those investors a 20x over time. And indeed, I actually think the upside opportunity is stronger than that, because that's based on our lower production levels. So look, that's a very quick synopsis. Hopefully that's given you a good feel for where we are. And then Robert, I will pass back to you for any questions.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. And just for those who may have joined partway through, you're welcome to ask questions via the Q&A box, not the chat box. The Q&A box just allows us to moderate them, and that also allows you to make anonymous questions, so you're not obliged to share your information, because obviously confidentiality is often paramount. We've got a couple of questions in there already. Actually, just before I turn to those, I just wanted to, I've got a couple of questions myself. I'm going to cheat and jump in. One was just right at the beginning. I think you mentioned that customers like Air Nostrum and Hightrans, so Highlands and Islands, those are, just to clarify, that those customers have actually, they've paid deposits on those, haven't they? They've not just sort of said, if you make this, we'll be interested to come and talk to us. They're a sort of firm order book. Is that correct?
So we have we hold aircraft for them under reservation agreements, which is really what we want to do with all customers, is ensure that they're real, credible, and tangible. So at the point that customers want to take space in our production book and reserve space, we put a reservation agreement in place, Robert, and at that time money is transferred to our lawyers and is held in escrow. They are refundable deposits. We have to do that. I'm not actually manufacturing their aircraft at this point in time, so it would be a little bit challenging to take non-refundable money. but it's really about reaching the earliest stage contractual agreement with them. Transfer of money proves that those customers are real. And actually, not only that, if Air Nostrum have been very public about wanting to bring this in and it being part of their decarbonisation story, people will understand that governmental organisations, can't do things just for economic benefits for an individual non-Scottish company, I could point out. So we want, it's about showing that the customers are real, tangible, and are going to stand behind this. We didn't want just to put LOIs in place, which may not then hold up to scrutiny. At the point at which I start manufacturing a customer's hull, we will at that point have moved them to a full-up, non-refundable delivery contract and take stage payments on the way through the build.
Yeah. Okay. Great. So one of the questions we've had in so I think you mentioned a share price, but there's a specific question of what is the valuation of the business today? So just a sort of pounds and pence figure of have you got a current valuation, as it were?
Yeah. So valuation today of the business is about £100 million. That obviously sits against the 140 million that we've expended. We don't value ourselves off money spent. We actually do forward EBITDA and we discount it back time and risk. But yeah, we're sitting about 100 million today. And obviously, that's against a $2 billion reservation book and a $7 billion pipeline. So that gives you some context.
Yeah. Okay. Brilliant. And then I guess just continuing on the sort of valuation and sort of future, obviously there's no guarantees of the future, always be disclaimers and so on. But is there a sort of a journey towards an eventual IPO, or what is the eventual sort of hope for a trade sale, or is there a sort of a general direction of exit and not, or that sort of, is there an exit strategy as such for investors who might choose to come in at the moment?
Yeah, 100%. We have publicly stated our intention to list this business. And so that's the plan we have in place. We think that's the right thing to do. Because yes, it would create liquidity for shareholders, but B, we think for a large developing aerospace business, actually the public scrutiny of being on the public markets, the confidence it gives to customers and supply chain, for many reasons, we think it's the right thing to do. So as I say, we've raised about 4 million at the 86p share price. After we close out that share price, we're doing about 130 million institutional raise, which will come behind that. That fully accelerates all our activity and fully launches everything in the production program. My view is the round after that, so in about 2 years' time, is likely to be an initial public offering. So that's the time frame that I think I'm working to. That is conditional on the health of the financial markets, which everyone has seen ebbed and wane over the last few years. But in broad sense, that's what we're thinking.
Okay, great. I've got another question coming up, and again, just for anyone who's just joined, if you want to ask questions, please pop them in the Q&A window rather than the chat window. It just makes it easier to moderate. The question is, will it be manufactured fully in the UK? In other words, what's the sort of, where? Yeah, firstly, geographically, where will it be produced? Will it be in one place? Will it be several places? Is this in a sort of, this is quite a non-technical sort of interpretation of what I think is being asked here. Is it going to be are all the parts sort of made here and then put together here, or is it assembled from parts that are made all around the world, or have you got a specific two specific suppliers? So, can you talk a little bit about the sort of how it's going to end up getting physically put together?
Yeah, Chris, are you?
Yeah, no, I'm happy. So our current intention is to build the first aircraft in South Yorkshire. We have a nominated site agreed with the South Yorkshire Mayoral Combined Authority and Doncaster City Council at a place called Carcroft Common. So the initial production facility will be there. The option remains for us to build aircraft basically anywhere in the world. Primarily, we are looking at the UK. The aircraft has a number of constituent parts. The hull, which is the largest single part and the largest single cost of the aircraft. The fabric for that is currently made by a company that's based in Texas. Doesn't mean to say that there aren't going to be competitors to that, but that's where the fabric is made. The initial engines, which have been chosen primarily for the fact that they are already certified engines, which means that our route to certification is for the aircraft, not the aircraft and the engines, which would add complexity and time to the delivery of first aircraft, come from a company called RED, who are based in Germany. As we said, we intend to hopefully by the end of the decade be able to produce aircraft that are electrically driven. Whilst there are lots of electric motors in development, there are currently no 500 kilowatt electric motors available, which is what the aircraft would require, and be powered by hydrogen fuel cells. And we're all aware of the route that exists, but the capacity, the capability doesn't at the moment to provide hydrogen fuel cells to be able to develop and build into the aircraft. But it's certainly the route that we want to go. And there are lots of opportunities for UK-based business to be a part of that delivery structure.
Brilliant, thank you. I think the thing that comes out, which just underlies the question, which I think is just worth sort of iterating, is we as a business, we are an intellectual property house, an assembler, and the airworthiness authority over the aircraft. Much like many other aerospace companies in the world, we are relying on the supply chain for the delivery of sub-assemblies. So we're not, as Chris says, we're not reinventing the wheel here. We're using existing approved aerospace technologies to the greatest extent we can. They come to us, we put them together and then deliver them onto customers. And so that, as Chris says, that means we've got that global supply chain being delivered into Doncaster, with aircraft then being delivered out around the world.
Okay, great. And then another question, continuing on the sort of the production aspect of it. The question is, how many aircraft can you make per year? And I think in the projections you had, I think in the first year, 2029, I think it was, correct me if I'm wrong, but three, I think it was three in the first one. I'm assuming there's going to be constraints around, how much money you've got in terms of orders, but also obviously the facilities that you've got in Doncaster and so on. Do you have is there a straightforward answer to that question? If so, that'd be great. If not, could you talk around sort of what the plans are to ramp up aircraft production and sort of, and again, if you had two sites, would it just be double, or, is there a sort of economies of scale, those kind of things?
Yeah, absolutely. So we expected to deliver at least 24 aircraft per annum. When you look at our business model, that's the sort of the baseline that we have in there. As we go, what we start off doing, Robert, is we're going to type certify a batch of 3 aircraft, which then those are the first aircraft that get delivered to customers. And there is a ramp up rate from when you deliver the very first aircraft to get to 24 aircraft per annum. And that's just about scaling the business, the delivery organization and everything. So there's a bit of a transition from those first deliveries in 2029 to hitting rate 24 per annum. We get there pretty quickly. As I've said, it's a mod, we're reliant on our supply chain. So if we want to go to delivering 48 aircraft per annum, yes, you need more facilities. Yes, you need more staff, but a lot of the leaning and a lot of the pressure goes onto the supply chain management as well. And look, we think this is a personal view of mine. So, I think there is every chance that the market demand for the aircraft is going to be stronger than we've currently anticipated. And so that scale up challenge is going to be a lovely challenge to have when we get to it. But it involves supply chain management, facilities management, and the onboarding of more people. So the idea of then moving to having a diversified geographical footprint, as Chris sort of iterated to, yes, we're starting in the UK, but could you put a site into North America, into the USA, if there's very strong demand there? We've done a lot of work with the US DoD, I think surveillance use aircraft there. And then you've got more space, more facilities, more workforce and all those things. So you would manage it, I think, around global footprint as well.
So another beauty of this aircraft is that, unlike conventional aircraft, it doesn't have a significant capital outlay required to actually build the aircraft. So if you go to an Airbus site or a Boeing site, you will see massive jigs and fixings that are all used to assemble the various parts of the aircraft, the wings, the body, etc. Airlander doesn't have that. So the relative additional cost to building additional facilities to build additional aircraft is quite low. There's quite a flexible model to expand the production capacity.
Okay. And at the moment, you mentioned the South Yorkshire site, so outside Doncaster, that effectively there's a site identified, but investments now needed to basically sort of start the facilities that will be needed to commence production there. Is that correct? Or is there stuff there you can already tap into, hangars and things like that? Yeah.
So the hangars that we need are bespoke. So we will be putting a new hangarage in place. We're not, despite the aircraft being large, we're not a heavy footprint. So there's nothing. So if I get a little bit technical, the heaviest lift that we do to get things onto this aircraft is sub 2 tons at 1.8 tons. And so we're relatively light industrial footprint. What we actually need is a weather shield where to assemble and put the aircraft together. As Chris says, we don't need jigging, lots of tooling, all those kind of things. We do need the hangarage space. We're very flexible about where that can go.
Yeah. Okay. Great. And then there's a question of how much will the aircraft cost? And I guess someone saying, I guess it will be different if it's military versus commercial. I think you talked about if I've understood correctly, effectively it's going to be the same aircraft for any usage. It's the bit at the bottom, the payload, the bit that hangs beneath it, that's going to change. To what extent do you, as hybrid air vehicles, set the price? Versus do you say, as a sort of customized thing, we want this, we want that, that's going to go into payload? Or do you actually just, is the plan to subcontract that to someone who would sort of fit a military version rather than a mobility version or a logistics version? And sort of, yeah, how does the sort of the end customer price come out of that?
So the aircraft itself is about $60 million. The cabin that goes underneath it can be bespoke. It is highly unlikely that HAV would be involved in the fit out of any defence aircraft. So we would sell the aircraft, if you like, to a defence prime who would do the fit out, because a lot of defence fit out is eyes only stuff. Whether we actually fit out the cabin of the aircraft with 100, 130 seats or 8 cabins or whatever is to be determined. It may be that a customer has a preferred supplier network. So if you're EasyJet, then you have your seat manufacturer, your preferred seat manufacturer, and Airbus would provide you with the aircraft, and the seat manufacturer does the fit out. So there's any number of combinations. When we talk to customers about potential customers about the cost of the aircraft, we say 61 million for the aircraft and allow about $10 million for your cabin fit out.
Yeah, okay, that sounds great. Thank you. I've got a very topical question here. This is about the military application of it. If Poland can shoot down fast Russian drones from overnight, won't the Airlander application for the military, won't that be too slow or easy for opponents to take out? I think the point is there, you've got a big, I assume, large, visible, and relatively slow moving compared to a jet or a drone or something. Is there how practical is it in a military context or a surveillance context to be sort of floating there and not just too easily shot down, to put it in blunt terms?
So I will give you a very short answer, and then I will give you a slightly longer answer, which is that the US Department of Defense have looked at this as the MOD, and their analysis says Airlander is no more or less vulnerable than any other large aircraft. The moment I say that, you'll say, well, that seems a little bit counterintuitive, doesn't it? Because it's big and it's slow. but I mean, surface-to-air missiles can pick up on, you know, whether it's a far aircraft or a slow aircraft. What's a little bit counterintuitive then is that we've got a large aircraft, but it's the hull is a fabric construction. There's no metal in it, and it's a pressure stabilized vessel. So it's actually got a very low radar signature. We've got 4 engines, which are piston cycle engines, which are at the 4 corners of a football field. And actually, in a defense use case, you may well be running on one of them at half power, 20% power. So there's a very low heat signature. And so the detectability of the aircraft is actually quite hard. They did some testing back in the days about hull tolerance to damage. And they are very, they are tolerant to small arms fire damage. And there is also a reasonable probability that if a missile were to come in contact with the hull, it may just go in one side and out the other because it's not hard enough to create a contact. So there's all those slightly counterintuitive things. The other thing which comes into effect is Airlander's payload endurance, so how long it can stay up and how much it can carry. It actually affords you the opportunity, rather than being over contested area, you can stand quite a long way back and you can still see, because you can take some such large aperture radars. So generally, this aircraft will be used in a standoff capability, which most surveillance aircraft are. So you keep out of harm's way. And because it can take such big radar, we can actually keep it further away than you would have to with other aircraft. So all of that detail ties together to say, actually, this is, in a military sense, it's quite a robust asset. The other thing, and this is a terrible analogy, I'm sure, is sometimes actually seeing things is very powerful. So if you walk into a bank and you know there's a security camera there, it modifies your behavior. So there's lots of scenarios where actually you want to know there is a surveillance asset there. It's used in a slightly different way.
Yeah, also just as a deterrent in some way, but a real deterrent that actually has capability.
So if you're defending your own coastline or your own economic area, and you're not going to expect then actually visibility is not a bad thing.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. And then so I was checking the questions that you talked a bit about competition in terms of other, I guess, types of transport and logistics, trucks, vans, boats, fixed wing aircraft, those kind of things. Are you able to talk a little bit about, is there much competition in your sort of space, as it were? Are there others trying to do take a sort of a similar profile approach in terms of the sort of the physical scale of it and the type of lift and like you say, airships versus not technically airships and those kind of things? What does the competition look like in that respect?
So there are 2 elements to that. There are a number of people who are trying to develop large-scale airships. Most notable of those would be a company called LTA Research, which is owned by Sergey Brin, Google's founder. And the other one would be Flying Whales, which is a French company. It's got some French governmental backing and a bit of Canadian governmental backing. They are making a conventional classic cigar-shaped airship. I've spoken about our view about why we want to operate as a heavier than air aircraft. So those guys are doing that. The only other people of note who are pursuing a hybrid strategy are a company called AT2 Aero. They are a US company. They're effectively a startup, but they bought their intellectual property from one of the large US defense contractors, Lockheed Martin, who were a key competitor to our business earlier in our life cycle. And actually, we competed against them for a US military contract, which we won. But this AT2 Aero has a similar hybrid approach. They've not done a full-scale prototype, and so demonstrably we are ahead from having gone through that iterative prototype phase and now being ready to productionize.
Okay, great. And when you say the full-scale prototype. There is, I think it's on YouTube. There is footage somewhere, or maybe on your website, of this actually flying over Bedfordshire.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So that's a real picture. That's not just an artistic.
That's a real.
No, that's exactly. Yes, exactly. Good prompt.
Okay, that's a real thing. Yeah. In the era of AI, it's always difficult to know. Fantastic. If anyone's got any last questions, because we're sort of getting up to the top of the hour, do again feel free to put anything else in the Q&A box, not the chat box, because that allows us to see it on our side. Otherwise, I just have one last question actually from my side, just following up from something you just said about competition. I think you mentioned one of the other businesses having some government backing from France and Canada. Is there governmental backing for hybrid air vehicles or the Airlander program at the moment? If not, do you think there should be? Can you just talk a little bit about, without getting too political, just the sort of the current environment around sort of aviation innovation and sort of sustainability or sustainable aviation innovation in the UK, and is it going in the right direction, or is it reliant on you guys to make it happen?
A very political question asking for a non-political answer, I would point out. So look, I think look, we've had grant support here in the UK and also from Europe through things like the Regional Growth Fund, Horizon 2020, the Aerospace Technology Institute. I think that there is a decent environment in the UK for funding early stage technologies. And so things like the ATI, they fund through TRL technology readiness level 1 up to 7. And we've had support from that for which we're very grateful for. We are now in a different phase where we're in the scale up and delivery challenge, and that puts us into TRL 7 to 9. And my view, and I don't think this is an exclusive view from many UK companies who go through that maturation, there isn't such good structures for carrying you through that latter part of the cycle when you're not at the point of profitable delivery. You're in the scale up challenge. It's an area where the UK is weaker, and I say this as a UK taxpayer as much as a CFO for HAV. I would really like the UK to be playing stronger into that area, because I think we've got an incredible research and development ecosystem here in the UK, and I think we see far too much of the benefits of productionizing technologies moving overseas. So I would strongly encourage the UK government within aerospace, within other capital intensive sectors, to be leaning in strongly and to be doing more than we have done historically. So we've got great support. As Chris said, we've teamed with South Yorkshire. We've got some financial commitment from Simca. They've committed a 7 million loan towards the business, which is conditional on some equity drawdown. They've provided 1 million of that. I would love to see some of the other parts of the overall UK government infrastructure leaning into this, so we can see all the benefits realised here, and Airlander being delivered to its customers.
Okay, great. I do have one last question that's come in. I'm going to hold you to the answer of this, obviously, perhaps not literally. It's a very simple question. When is the earliest date Airlander will be in flight? So that'll be, I guess, the Airlander 10, which is the first one. What's your projection for the earliest that it can be in flight? And I assume by the question of that is not a sort of technical training flight, an actual commercial. When can someone be flying in it from a mobility point of view, or lifting cargo in a commercial context?
So look, we are looking to deliver this decade, which I said at the front end here. So it will be the back end of, but that's what we're looking to do.
Fantastic. All right. Well, thank you very much. We're nearly out of time, so I'll just say a big thank you to Hoofer and Chris from Hybrid Air Vehicles for taking us through that. That's a very exciting journey. Thank you for Edison for helping make this webinar happen. Thank you for the participants for your questions and your interest. Do feel free to contact us afterwards if you've got further questions. We can pass them on to the team and get them answered. We'll be in touch following that, and we can share copies of the slides as needed. And I think, is that it? That's it for today. So thank you very much. And yeah, so
thank you from me as well, Robert, for hosting, to you and Edison for putting this together, everyone for attending. Chris and I are also available to do follow-up calls with anyone who wants to dig a little bit deeper into the opportunity.
Perfect. All right. Thank you very much, and have a good rest of the day, everyone. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thanks.